this photograph. Every time I do, it makes me laugh. How did our eyes get so red? And what the hell is on Joey's head? This is where I grew up. I think the president owner fixed it up. I never knew we ever went without. The second floor is hot for sneaking out. And this is where I went to school. Most of the time had better things to do. Criminal record says I've broken twice. I must have done it half a dozen times. I wonder if it's too late. Should I go back and try to graduate? Life's better now than it was back then. If I was them, I wouldn't let me in.
An arc storm drops 10 feet of rainfall, 100 times more than a normal winter cloudburst. Everyday weather in an extraordinary mix. Air pressure drops lower than normal, strengthening winds from the ocean. Temperature and humidity rise, so clouds carry more rain. Then the system stalls over coastal hills. More storms catch up with the first. The result? One vast superstorm. Day after day of torrents.
Tropical weather as well as our weather in the lower 48 and southern Canada. We got a very active pattern setting up here. Here's Tropical Depression 18, which essentially is probably most likely 100% chance going to become Sandy, Tropical Storm Sandy. And this storm is going to continue off towards the northeast. And many of you are probably shuffling through the GFS models wondering, well, is there going to be a nor'easter for the eastern coast of the United States and eastern Canada? Well, if you made the same confusion mistake I did, that system is actually being picked up by the GFS model on between the 153-hour to 186-hour run, and brings the system, if we take a look at the model data here, brings the model data all the way up the east coast here. And GFS is one of the most western extent models. It brings the storm on the western periphery towards the eastern seaboard, and many of the models bring this storm up the coast as a very formidable hybrid storm with tropical characteristics and subtropical characteristics. So this should be noted that this storm could cause extensive heavy torrential rains up and down the east coast and lots of wind. At this time it's too early to tell, but Jamaica's going to get hit by this, Cuba's going to get hit by this, and eventually up the east coast. This storm could briefly become a hurricane very quickly here. This storm is looking very good on satellite picture. Look at the outflow. In fact, I'm pretty certain that today this will be Tropical Storm Sandy. This really is looking good.
Remember the old arcade? Blue every...
Okay, yeah, it's a tough forecast. They're all tough. This one extra tough. Our confidence level is increasing with each passing computer run that Sandy is going to make that turn towards the United States over the weekend or early next week. Confidence level is low as to exactly where Sandy will come ashore. Hurricane Sandy now tracking right over Jamaica. Hurricane warnings in effect eastern Cuba, Jamaica, tropical storm watch in effect for southeastern Florida. And here is what one model is predicting. This is the high-resolution 15-kilometer BAMS model from Barron Services. Tracking right over the Bahamas, brushing eastern Florida Friday night, and then pushing towards the Outer Banks. It looks like it may stay just east of the Outer Banks, but it's going to be a very close call. I want to show you some of the model solutions right now. This is an ensemble, all the various models. Yesterday, more than half of the models whisked Sandy out to sea. We put our money on the ECMWF, the European model, and sure enough now, as many as 75 to 80% of the models indicating that Sandy is going to be absorbed in a large trough of low pressure. It may become sort of a hybrid hurricane nor'easter by the weekend, losing its warm core characteristics.
The cops is hanging out. They say somebody.
There'll be a full moon in that time frame. Astronomically high tides will be occurring along with this surge of water coming up off the Atlantic. So we are going to have some possibilities of major coastal flooding as well. Again, it is becoming more and more confident that this storm will affect the region, and basically we don't know how severe it's going to be. 3 days away. Again, we're writing this blog on a Thursday night, so all the computer models are starting to come into agreement, and basically it's a wake-up call in my book.
We used to listen to the radio and sing along with every.
Heard about it on the news, most likely. If you haven't, there's Hurricane Sandy that formed down here in the Caribbean, came across Cuba, and is now pulling up the east coast of the United States, currently parallel to Florida, and coming up north to North Carolina, South Carolina, and now has projected tracks taking it right up over the northeast. Now they're calling it the Frankenstorm. The reason they're calling it that, first of all, is because it's headed to the northeast United States, where it's set to mix with this cold front, this blast of cold air that has come in over the last 24 to 48 hours across the Midwest, causing all those tornadoes a day ago up here in the North Midwest. Well, now that storm over the central Midwest has pulled up to the far north and has a long arm extending down. There's a huge line of storms that broke out in front of this storm, and it's set to mix cold air behind it at about 20 to 30 degrees and tropical out in front. And it's set to mix right here where it makes landfall. At least that's projections from most of the professionals.
Tumultuous waves hammering Florida beaches, serious erosion, and almost 4 inches of rain along parts of the Florida coast. That's what Sandy looks like down here. But up there, from space, you can clearly see the tropical storm. Its large, stretching wind field sending tropical storm force winds over 900 miles across. As Sandy aggravates the Atlantic, its path of destruction has already left at least 43 people dead across the Caribbean. Through the weekend, the storm will hug the Carolinas before turning its eye directly toward the coast, somewhere between the mid-Atlantic, Northeast, and New England by Monday night.
We said someday we'd find out how it feels to sing with more than just a steering wheel. Kim's the first girl I kissed. I was so nervous that I nearly missed. She's had a couple of kids since then. I haven't seen her since God knows when. Oh, God. Every memory of looking out the back door. I have a photo album spread out on my bedroom floor. It's time to say it, time to say it. Goodbye. Goodbye.
burst, trees, power lines, torn and tossed. The liquid fist punched through the battery, making cars, boats, flooding Ground Zero. Then scenes like this began. One of the city's transformers buffeted by 90-mile-an-hour winds and salty water, an atomic-looking explosion. 670,000 in the city in darkness.
I can relive those days. I know the one thing that would never change. Every memory of looking out the back door. I have the photo album spread out on my bedroom floor. It's hard to say it, time to say it. Goodbye. Bedroom floor. It's hard to say it, time to say it. Goodbye, goodbye. Every memory of walking out the front door. I found the photo of the present I was looking for. It's hard to say it, time to say it. Goodbye, goodbye. Look at this photograph. Every time I do it makes me laugh. Every time I do it makes me. Look at this photograph. Every time I do it makes me laugh. How did our eyes get so red? And what the hell is on Joey's head? This is